Hi guys, this is Matthew from Baby Fat Tutorials and thank you for joining us. Today we'll be showing you the steps needed to create this house in a glass image, which you can then use to make your own compositions. All the images that I use for this tutorial will be listed in the description, so you can follow along at home if you want to. With all that said and done, let's get started.
Here we go.
Okay, so we're going to create a new document. I've gone for the portrait 4x6 as it's a nice size for the composition that we're going to be working with, but you feel free to choose something that works better for you. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to bring in our background, which is this nice white floor image that I found online. I've put a link for it in the description if you want to use the same one. And on top of that I'm going to bring our glass object, and I'm going to shrink that down just a little bit, just so it's a bit of a nicer size for us to work with. Let's move that over slightly. Okay. Now, if we drop the opacity down of this glass, you'll see that the perspective along the bottom of the glass is different to the floor that we're placing it on. So what we're going to do is we're going to warp the bottom edge of that floor just to bring those perspective lines more into line with the glass and give it a much more natural look. So we'll just bring in the edges first, and then bring down the middle sections to straighten out those lines and give us a much shallower field of perspective. Okay, and that looks a bit more natural. Now we'll set the opacity back to 100% on our glass. Right, our next step is to remove the gradient from behind the glass. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is select the outline of our glass. Now there are several tools we can use that, such as the lasso, the magic wand, the quick wand selection tool, but we're going to keep it nice and simple for this example and use a feature in Photoshop CC 2019 called Select Subject. And what that does is it tries to work out the object of interest in your image and automatically puts a selection around it. So as you can see, it's selected most of the glass without us having to do any additional work. And then we can just use a quick wand selection just to touch up those little areas that were missed and give ourselves a cleaner selection. Now we don't have to be too precise at this moment because we're going to fix that later on using the mask. But we're just going to use this just to capture most of the glass for us. And that'll do for now. Now if we click this little icon down here, this will give us a clipping mask for that glass. And the way a clipping mask works is black areas of the mask hide the image and white areas reveal the image. So that's created a mask using our selection of the white shape in the middle, which matches our glass. And we can add to that mask by painting, using our brush, some white colour. So we'll just fix this area on the left hand side just by painting a bit of white over the top. Now if we go too far and paint extra, all we need to do is swap to the black brush and we can just simply paint that way again. So it gives us a non-destructive way of adjusting our selection and our mask. So if you ever need to change that at a later time, we can do that with no problem. So I'm just going to go through and clean up these edges so there's a much nicer selection. And I'm going to speed this up so you don't have to watch me do that. And we'll carry on once I've selected the glass. Okay, now that we've got our selection in place and we've cleaned up those edges, we now need to get rid of the grey gradient from inside the glass so it shows through that background. Now we're going to do that using what's called blend modes. Now the blend mode that we're going to use for this is called multiply. And what multiply does is it takes the pixel of the underlying layer and multiplies that pixel value by the colour of the top layer. Now I'm going to cover this in more details in a separate tutorial, but for now think of it as essentially the white areas become equal to the colour behind it and the black areas stay black. And the grey areas tend to be a mix of the grey and the underlying layer. Now as you'll notice along the bottom of the glass, the grey has stayed quite dark due to that original background gradient. So we need to lighten that multiply effect so that the glass is a lot lighter on that background. Now we'll do that just by dropping the opacity down. until the glass looks a nice natural glass colour. And don't worry about dark spots because we're going to fix them next. So if we drop down to about 40%, that gives us a nice glass colour. And what we'll do is we'll drag that layer onto the layer icon to give ourselves a copy, or you can press Command or Control J. And we're going to choose the blend mode darker colour, which is kind of a bit like multiply but emphasises those dark spots a bit more, which allows us to bring back those dark highlights and maintain the transparency on the glass. Now the next thing that we need to do is bring back the highlights from the glass, those bits of shine which we lost by using the multiply, and we'll do that by using the opposite filter to multiply, which is called screen. So we'll duplicate our layer and we'll set the multiply mode to the blend mode to screen, and you'll see that all those white highlights have become really bold and the glass has got that shine back, but we've got a bit too much of it. We only want the shine in the areas of the glass that reflects light. This includes the top of the base, the stem, and the curved edges of the top section. We don't want to have any of the screen effect in the non-reflective areas of the glass, such as the front of the base. To achieve this, we'll use a blend feature called Blend If. Blend If works by only applying the effect in areas that match a specific rule. If you see at the bottom of the layer style, we have the Blend If section. The slider on the left tells the layer to only apply the style to the pixels lighter than this point, and the slider on the right tells the layer to only apply the style to pixels darker than that point. As I bring the slider up, the dark areas in the glass become unaffected by the screen effect. Likewise, if we move the right hand side down, the brighter areas become unaffected. We want to keep that full though. You will notice that the dark areas have created a harsh edge, which we don't really want. We can blend that edge by breaking the slider so it uses a gradient range by holding the Option key on the Mac or Alt key on Windows and clicking on it. This allows us to smooth out that effect, which looks really nice. Now we have too much shine in the top area due to our original background. It's quite hard to see on screen, so I'll just colour the line behind the glass so you can see this a bit easier. We will add this shine back in once we've sorted the composition, so for now we'll just delete all of this by painting in black on the mask. I'll just colour behind the glass so you can see this a bit easier. We don't have to be too neat as we can clear the edges of the mask later if we need to. There we go. Let's pop this into a group and move on to the inside of the glass, which we will do in another group to keep things nice and clean. First thing we'll need to do is bring in our soil layer and scale this down to fit the glass. Let's just move this up a bit and centre it at the bottom. We will then warp the soil slightly to match the shape of the glass and give it a bit more of a natural filled glass look. We will keep a slight gap around the edge to take into account the thickness of the glass and give it a much more realistic look. You don't have to be too neat with the glass, as we will clean this edge up in a moment. Now we have the main part of the soil done, we'll just clean up the loose grass strands using the spot healing tool. By drawing along the top of the soil, we can clean that whole edge really easily. We'll add some grass in again later. Now let's build up our first grass layer. Let's bring in the grass and scale it down. We'll squash this a bit to give us shorter grass. Again, let's add in a mask, but this time we'll start with the mask from the soil layer, as it will give us a good starting point. We can copy this by holding the Option or Alt key and dragging the mask to our grass layer. We can then adjust our mask to give it some grass. Let's duplicate the grass and flip this vertically by setting the transform to a width of -100%. This allows us to create a second grass layer that doesn't look identical to the first one. Let's adjust the opacity to give it a bit of depth. We'll create a nice blend between the two so this edge isn't too harsh. Now, let's adjust the flow. For this next bit, flow works by only applying a percentage of the brush. As you can see, at 14% I need to do multiple strokes to get a full black line. At 100% I only need one stroke, and at 50% I need 2 strokes. This lower flow allows us to adjust the mask gradually and create a faded brushing blend as we can build up our mask gradually. There we go, a much cleaner grass line. Let's increase the flow and shrink our brush down to bring back some stray grass lines into our soil. This just gives it a bit more of a natural edge to the soil line. I'm just rushing this bit here, but take as much time as you need to get this edge nice. That's our grass and soil done, let's bring in our house. Again, let's scale this down to a more manageable size and pop this in the middle of our grass. The first thing to do here is to cut out our house. As we have a lot of straight lines, the polygonal lasso tool will work great for selecting straight lines. We will click each point along the house to create our selection. Again, we don't have to be overly neat here, as we can always adjust our mask afterwards to clean up the edges. If you do go too far out with a point though, you can press the backspace to delete the last selected point. Click at the starting point to complete our selection. Click the mask, and just like that, we have a house. We'll use a spot healing tool just to remove that satellite dish, as we don't really need it. Our next step is to add some grass around the base of the house so it looks like it's sat in the grass. We will duplicate an existing grass layer and bring this above the house layer. Now using the black brush, we can adjust our mask to hide the areas of grass that we don't need. Again, I'm rushing this slightly, but you take all the time you need to build this up. There we go. That looks really nice. One thing that looks a bit off though is how bright the house is compared to the grass and the soil. So to adjust this, we will look at curves. Curves allow us to adjust the brightness in the dark and light areas of the image. Let's add a curve adjustment layer by clicking on the adjustments icon at the bottom. Select the house layer first so it's above that layer. Now, the right hand side controls the brightness in the light areas, and the left side of the graph controls the brightness in the dark areas. Now let's bring the brightness in the light areas down. Now as you can see, it has affected the whole image, but we only want it to affect the house. If we click this icon, then it locks the adjustment so it only affects the layer directly below it. And as you can see, only the house is now affected. Now let's adjust the midtones to reduce the brightness on the house. And let's just increase the brightness for those sunspots. There's before and after. That looks nice, no? Now, let's use another curves layer to create a shadow on the grass from the house. So, let's lower the brightness. And so we only apply the shadow where we need it, we can use a mask. So let's first attach the curves to the grass layer in front of the house. Now, we don't have enough grass to apply the shadow to in this layer. So what should we do? Add some back in using our mask. Let's paint a bit of white here, and there we go. We have some grass. Now, if we invert our curves mask, we can paint back in the areas that we want shadow. Use a low flow so we can build this up gradually. And there we go, some added shadow. And we're nearly done. The next bits, which are the best effects, happen quite quickly. First up, let's add a shadow to our glass, as it's floating a bit above the floor at the moment. Let's paint the black area. Use the eraser to remove a bit of extra from the top. And drop the opacity to make a bit more natural shade. Let's move it around a bit for better position and give it a bit more of a clean up. Now to give the shadow a better colour, let's add a colour overlay effect to the shadow. By opening the layer styles and choosing colour overlay, click the colour icon and use the eyedropper to choose a colour from the floor. Increase the brightness slightly by selecting the B brightness and using the slider to the right. That looks brilliant. To really bring the composition together, you should apply something to the whole image so that each element has the same effects. This allows them to feel more part of the same image. For this we will use colour grading by adding the colour lookup table. Colour grading works by changing what colour is classed as black, white and the mid colours. So applying a colour grading changes all instances of black to a similar colour. So let's apply one to the inside of the glass. And you can see that as I change the lookup table, the colour ranges change and the elements feel more combined. The late sunset looks really nice here. Let's just adjust the fill, which changes how much of the effect to apply. Let's add the colour effect again to the whole image with the lower fill, and there we go. That looks amazing, and we're done. One last thing I nearly forgot. Let's bring back in that glass shine we took out earlier. Just using the white brush, let's just mask in some curvatures to the glass. Bit too much there. And there. And that's it. We're done. So, to recap. We brought in the floor and the glass. Warped the floor slightly to fix the perspective. We then masked the glass and added a multiply effect so we could adjust the glass colour. We duplicated this and added a darker colour effect to bring in those dark spots. Then we added a screen layer to bring back the shine. We then brought in our soil and cleaned up the edge. Brought in some grass, duplicated flips and faded it to add a bit of depth. Then we blended those edges. We then brought in the house, masked it and added some front grass. We then adjusted the curves to reduce the brightness and then added some shadow. We then added in a shadow to the glass and then colour graded the image to bring it all together. And that was it. I hope this tutorial has helped and you now know what to do to make your own objects in a glass composition. Please drop us a comment below with the images that you've made, and if you've enjoyed watching, please like this video and subscribe for more tutorials. Thanks again for watching and see you next time.